Hello, my name is Preston Foster. Mr. Hayden asked me to do something about teaching something about the banjo. Good place to start is where I started. This particular book, How to Play the Five-String Banjo, written by Mr. Pete Seeger. You can go all over YouTube and all over the internet looking for things about Pete Seeger. He was and is a great American treasure as a writer and folk singer and folk music historian. From Pete's book, briefly, the history of the banjo as we know it is that the first banjos were brought to America by African slaves. Those were instruments that basically were like a dried gourd that had some kind of an animal skin across the top of it that would be like a drum. Somebody asked a question about drums. And there was a string attached that would vibrate that drum through some kind of a bridge, and then a stick of some length that had a string on it, that string could then be moved up and down with what we call fretting. If you shorten the string, the tone goes up. If you lengthen the string, the tone goes down. You can see that when you look at a piano. The bass strings are much longer than the treble strings. Okay, so a picture of a banjo as a drum. This little guy is good to show because this drum, what we refer to as the pot on a banjo, was actually made by the Remo Tambourine Company. This is a very modern one. This one's about 10 years old. This is a tambourine without the rattles, to which they have attached a neck and strings and a bridge, and you can play music with that, with the drum, making the amplifier, if you will, for the sound of the banjo. Next point, this one has nylon strings, which would approximate the gut strings that were used in earlier times until modern technology came up with nylon strings and modern steel strings. This one is famous because it made the trip to Germany about 14 years ago when our daughter was in a children's choir in Paducah, and we couldn't take a banjo on the plane unless it went in the overhead luggage rack, and this fit in the luggage rack, so this was the banjo that accompanied the children's choir in Germany. This particular banjo here has two parts. The pot of this banjo is at least 100 years old because this particular type, this is called a Guckert rim. This was some really good sound engineering and some really good engineering at the end of the 19th century, which was the age of inventions and machines in America. Mr. Guckert in Toledo, Ohio, designed and developed this banjo. The pot, as you can see if you're looking there, oh yeah, it's two walls. The skin head is actually stretched out by the inner one. So what that does is it turns this little inside space into an amplifier, an acoustic amplifier. You can see that also in what are called dobro guitars or amplified guitars. This particular banjo, as you notice on the neck, has no frets. We refer to that as a violin neck. It's a flat neck, so you find the right spot as you do on a violin or a fiddle by feeling around until you get the tone right. This one also has nylon strings, but it has violin pegs. So they're friction pegs that hold nylon strings. They don't take a whole lot of tension. It's got a very soft sound, but you can tell how much louder it is than that little banjo. Styles of picking banjos. Flat picks like you use on a guitar. 4-string banjos, 5-string banjos. That 5th string was Mr. Dobson, I believe. I have to look that one up in the history book, but it was an American invention just before the Civil War in the 1840s, 1850s. Banjos were played on riverboats. Banjos were played by cowboys going west in the Old West. And banjos by the early 20th century had achieved such popularity. They were made in anything from piccolo banjos, they're very tiny, up to bass banjos. You almost literally would have to stand on a ladder to play one of these banjos because the drum part would be 5 or 6 feet across. Very deep sound. There were banjo orchestras. You can Google that one on the internet too. This one was a gift from a friend. This old part, authentic, Guckert. The new part was made in 1970, which sounds new to me, but may sound a little old to you as well. Try a song with this. Be kind to your parents, though they don't deserve it. Remember that grown-ups is a difficult phase of life, apt to be nervous and overexcited, confused by their daily storm and strife. Just keep in mind, though it seems hard, I know, most parents were children long ago. Incredible, so treat them with kindness and sweet understanding, in spite of the foolish things they do. Someday you might wake up and find you're a parent too. That's the old banjo in the house. This particular guy right here is what we refer to as a bluegrass banjo. It's 5-string with steel strings. It has a resonator, meaning there are air holes all the way around the edge inside this wooden resonator that the sound comes back out through the front. So as the sound is made here, it goes through the banjo and comes up on the back. If you're listening to bluegrass music, in most cases, you will find a 5-string banjo with a resonator. But they show up in all kinds of places. Mr. Bela Fleck performed with the Nashville Symphony Orchestra with a symphony that was written for the banjo. You can find people playing Bach, Beethoven, and all kinds of classic music on banjos. This is the loud guy in the family. I am not a bluegrass player. I was at one time, but I still keep it around. The last one, which is my working instrument that I play all the time, since we're now at 7 minutes, the last one, this is referred to as the Pete Seeger type, because this banjo has 3 extra frets. And what those extra frets do for the instrument is allow you to play in lower keys. This particular instrument, when that capo comes off, that's capodestro in Italian, means third hand. All that does is press the strings in a way up there so that it'll play higher in tone. He hasn't rehearsed for this, as is obvious. Before you perform, you might want to rehearse. Banjos have been around since the colonial times here in America. Around the world, the banjo is called America's original instrument. But the thing about the banjo is, I have a couple of quotes here that I think are worth sharing with you. The first one is from Steve Martin, known in my generation as a comedian and a film director and an actor, but for the last 20 years performing as a world-class top 10 in the world banjo player. This is from Steve Martin. The banjo is such a happy instrument. You can't play a sad song on the banjo. It always comes out so cheerful. Gloom, despair, and agony on me, you just can't do it. Steve Martin. Of course, banjo players are reputed to be subjects of jokes, particularly in the bluegrass world. So there are a few jokes that you might appreciate, like, what's the difference between a banjo and a trampoline? People mostly take their shoes off before they jump up and down on a trampoline. Groan, eyeballs rolling. What do you get when you throw a banjo and an accordion off the roof? Applause. And the last one from Pete Seeger himself. How is playing the banjo a lot like working a chainsaw blindfolded? You don't have to be very good to get a lot of attention. If you got questions, ask Mr. Hayden. We're at 10 minutes. Keep picking. Take it easy, but take it.